I'll give you $10,000 to be my date to my ex's wedding. Those were the exact words a millionaire said to a homeless woman he found on the street. His plan? Use her to make his ex-fiancée jealous. Her response? Not what he expected. Instead of gratitude, he received sarcasm and defiance. Little did he know, this woman wasn't just fighting for survival on the streets. She was Isabella Deo, the daughter of a man whose entire empire had been destroyed by his ex. The same woman he was trying to make jealous had systematically ruined Isabella's family. This wasn't just a wedding date anymore. It was about to become the perfect storm of revenge neither of them planned. What would you do if your ex who broke your heart invited you to their wedding? For William Lancaster, the answer was revenge, a dish he intended to serve with calculated precision. The cream-colored envelope sat on William's mahogany desk like a ticking bomb. His name was printed in elegant calligraphy on the front, a detail that made his blood boil even more. William Lancaster, CEO of Lancaster Enterprises and one of the city's most eligible bachelors, stared at the wedding invitation with a mixture of disbelief and rage. Olivia Harrington and Charles Montrose request the pleasure of your company. The words swam before his eyes as he gripped the heavy cardstock. William's knuckles turned white as the memories flooded back. Olivia ending their engagement with cold efficiency, explaining that Charles offered better family connections and a more suitable future. 6 months later, here was the invitation, like salt rubbed into a wound that hadn't fully healed. Is this some kind of sick joke? William muttered to himself, running his hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. His corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, suddenly felt suffocating. The empire he'd built, the wealth he'd accumulated, none of it had been enough for Olivia. William's assistant knocked tentatively on the door before entering. "Your 2 o'clock is here, Mr. Lancaster." "Cancel it," William snapped, not taking his eyes off the invitation. "Cancel everything for the rest of the day." Alone again, William paced the length of his office, his designer shoes making sharp sounds against the hardwood floor. The humiliation burned in his chest. Not only had Olivia left him for someone else, but now she had the audacity to invite him to witness her happy ending. The thought of sitting alone at that wedding, the object of pitying glances and whispered conversations, was unbearable. Didn't take her long to move on, did it? William looked up to see Damon Roberts, his closest friend and VP of marketing, leaning against the doorframe. Without waiting for an invitation, Damon strolled in and picked up the offending envelope. 6 months, William replied, his voice tight. 6 months after ending our 3-year relationship. Damon let out a low whistle. "Are you going?" "I don't know," William admitted, something he rarely did. In business, William Lancaster always knew the answer. In matters of the heart, he was navigating unfamiliar territory. "If I don't go, everyone will think I'm still hung up on her. And if you go alone, everyone will pity the abandoned fiancé," Damon added, understanding the dilemma immediately. "Bring a date." The suggestion hung in the air, deceptively simple yet instantly appealing. William's mind began to race with possibilities. A date. Not just any date, Damon continued, warming to the idea. Someone who'll make Olivia question her choices. Someone who'll turn heads. Someone unexpected. William's frown slowly transformed into a calculated smile. This wasn't just about attending the wedding anymore. This was about making a statement, about showing Olivia that he had moved on to bigger and better things, about reclaiming the narrative. "You're right," William said, his voice steadier now. "I need someone spectacular. Someone who'll be the talk of the event." As the afternoon wore on, William dismissed Damon and sat alone with his thoughts. The more he considered it, the more the plan took shape in his mind. He'd bring someone so remarkable, so captivating, that Olivia would be forced to acknowledge what she'd given up. His date would need to be beautiful, of course, but also intelligent enough to hold conversations with the elite guests who would be in attendance. William scrolled through his contacts, considering and dismissing potential candidates. Models he'd dated briefly, the daughter of a business associate, an actress he'd met at a charity gala. None seemed right for the occasion. None would create the impact he desired. "It needs to be someone completely unexpected," he murmured to himself. Someone who'll shock everyone, especially Olivia. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across his office, William realized the fundamental flaw in his thinking. His obsession with creating the perfect revenge scenario revealed more about his own wounded pride than anything else. The fact that he was plotting elaborate schemes instead of simply moving on with his life showed just how deeply Olivia had affected him. But self-awareness didn't change his course. If anything, it strengthened his resolve. William Lancaster was not accustomed to losing, in business or in love, and he certainly wasn't accustomed to public humiliation. He grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator, nodding curtly to the few employees still at their desks. The security guard tipped his hat as William strode through the lobby and out into the crisp evening air. William's driver opened the car door, but William waved him off. "I'll walk tonight, James. I need to clear my head." The streets were still busy with the evening rush. William barely noticed the people around him, his mind consumed with his revenge plan. He passed high-end boutiques and restaurants, places he and Olivia had frequented during their relationship. Each one held memories he was now determined to override. As he waited at a crosswalk, his gaze drifted to a figure sitting on the sidewalk across the street. A young woman with tangled hair was huddled against a building, a small cardboard sign propped against her knees. Something about her posture, proud despite her circumstances, caught William's attention. The light changed, and William crossed without conscious thought, drawn to this woman for reasons he couldn't articulate. As he approached, he could see her more clearly. Despite her dirty clothes and unwashed appearance, there was a striking quality to her features. Her eyes, when they briefly met his, showed neither desperation nor defeat. And that's when the idea struck him, an idea so outrageous, so perfectly shocking, that it took his breath away. What if his date to Olivia's wedding wasn't some model or socialite? What if, instead, he brought someone completely outside their social circle? Someone no one would expect William Lancaster to associate with. William stopped directly in front of the woman. She looked up at him with guarded curiosity, clearly accustomed to being either ignored or harassed by passers-by. "Excuse me," William said, his voice softer than usual. "I'd like to make you an offer." The woman's eyebrow raised slightly, suspicious. "I'm not interested in whatever you're selling, mister." Her voice surprised him. Educated, articulate, with an edge of defiance that few people ever directed at William Lancaster. Far from deterring him, her response only confirmed that he'd found exactly what he was looking for. "I'm not selling anything," William replied, a genuine smile forming on his lips for the first time that day. "I'm buying one evening of your time in exchange for whatever price you name." The woman's eyes narrowed, studying him with an intensity that made William strangely uncomfortable, as if she could see right through his designer suit to the wounded ego beneath. "And what exactly would this evening entail?" she asked, her tone making it clear she was prepared to reject him regardless of his answer. William took a deep breath, suddenly aware of how bizarre his proposition would sound. But he was committed now. "I need a date for a wedding. My ex-fiancée's wedding, to be precise." The mysterious woman's eyes flickered with something beyond the expected desperation of someone in her position. Was it amusement or contempt? William had mastered reading people in boardrooms across the globe, yet this homeless woman's gaze left him completely disarmed and, oddly, fascinated. "A date for your ex's wedding?" The woman repeated his words, her voice carrying a sharp edge that caught William off guard. He'd expected gratitude, perhaps even excitement at his proposition. Instead, her lips curled into a sardonic smile. "Is this some kind of social experiment? Rich man takes street woman to fancy event to see how badly she'll embarrass herself?" William blinked, momentarily speechless. People didn't speak to him this way. Not employees, not business associates, certainly not someone who should be grateful for his attention. His gaze traveled over her appearance, the layers of weathered clothes, the tangled hair that hadn't seen proper care in who knows how long. But those eyes held a dignity that seemed completely at odds with her circumstances. They didn't plead or beg, they challenged. "I assure you, it's not an experiment," William replied, regaining his composure. He straightened his already perfect posture, falling back on the authority that usually served him well. "I'm offering you enough money to change your life. All you need to do is accompany me to a wedding. The woman tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made William feel as though she was dissecting his every motivation. "How generous," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You want to rent me as some decorative doll for the night? Tell me, do you have a pretty woman fantasy, or is this just about shocking your ex?" William felt heat rise to his face. No one had ever cut through his intentions so efficiently, so mercilessly. Most people in his world operated with polite fictions and diplomatic language, never daring to name the obvious truth. This woman, with nothing to her name, somehow possessed the audacity to call out his scheme within seconds of hearing it. "It's a mutually beneficial arrangement," William insisted, struggling to maintain the upper hand in a conversation that had veered wildly off his expected script. "You get money, I get a date. It's straightforward." "Straightforward," she echoed, the word hanging between them like a challenge. "And what happens when I inevitably fail to convincingly play the role of sophisticated date? When I use the wrong fork or don't know the proper small talk? Won't that just make you look worse?" Her question struck at the heart of the flaw in his plan, one he hadn't fully considered. William found himself fumbling for an answer, an unusual position for someone who prided himself on always being 3 steps ahead in any negotiation. "We can address those concerns," he said finally. "Proper clothing, a quick education on etiquette. You seem intelligent enough to adapt." "Oh, thank you for acknowledging my basic intelligence," she replied, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes flashing. "How affirming to know you don't think I'm completely primitive." William fought back a smile, surprised to find himself almost enjoying their verbal sparring. There was something refreshing about her raw honesty after years of navigating the careful, calculated conversations of his social circle. "Look," he said, softening his approach, "I'm offering you $10,000 for one evening of your time. That could be a new start, an apartment, whatever you need." For the first time, he saw her expression shift, revealing a momentary calculation behind those defiant eyes. She was considering it, but not with the desperate gratitude he'd expected. Instead, she seemed to be weighing the proposition with the cool assessment of a chess player evaluating a move. "20,000, she countered, her voice steady. William raised an eyebrow. 15. 20, she repeated, unflinching. "And I want half up front. Call it insurance against you changing your mind when you realize I might embarrass you, despite your crash course in sophistication." William found himself nodding, equal parts irritated and impressed by her negotiation skills. Who was this woman? How could someone living on the streets maintain such composure, such control? "Fine. 20,000, he agreed. "But you'll need to follow my lead on everything. The story we tell, how you present yourself, all of it." She extended her hand, surprising him with the formality of the gesture. "Deal." As William shook her hand, he noticed the strength in her grip, despite her apparent circumstances. There was nothing fragile about this woman. "I suppose we should introduce ourselves properly," she said, "since we'll be spending such an intimate evening together." "William Lancaster," he offered, though he suspected she already knew exactly who he was. "Isabella," she replied, offering nothing more. "Just Isabella?" She smiled enigmatically. "For now, just Isabella is all you need to know." William studied her face, searching for some hint of her story, some explanation for the paradox sitting before him. "Why are you agreeing to this? Just for the money?" Isabella's smile shifted into something more genuine, almost mischievous. "Let's just say I'm curious to see how far a man like you is willing to go to prove something to someone who's already moved on." Her words struck with uncomfortable precision, making William wonder again how she seemed to read him so easily while remaining completely opaque herself. "We should go," William said, eager to regain some semblance of control. "There's a lot to do before the wedding." As Isabella gathered her few belongings, William called his driver. He watched her movements, noting the careful way she folded her cardboard sign, the methodical organization of her small backpack. Nothing frantic or chaotic, every motion deliberate and composed. In the car, Isabella sat with surprising ease in the leather seat of his luxury vehicle, showing none of the wide-eyed wonder or grateful excitement he'd anticipated. Instead, she gazed out the window with the casual air of someone who belonged there, leaving William to wonder if he'd made a terrible mistake or stumbled upon something extraordinary. One thing was certain. Isabella was not the simple prop he had envisioned for his revenge plan. She was something else entirely, a mystery that William suddenly found himself desperate to unravel. Who was this woman who could sit on a sidewalk one moment and negotiate like a seasoned businesswoman the next? As the car pulled away from the curb, William realized, with a mixture of apprehension and fascination, that he wasn't the one in control anymore. The polished marble floors of Bellissima Salon glimmered under crystal chandeliers as William's sleek black Bentley pulled up at the entrance. Isabella stepped out with an unexpected grace that momentarily caught him off guard. Unlike most first-time visitors who would gawk at the opulence, she scanned the space with a measured gaze, betraying neither awe nor intimidation. This wasn't the wide-eyed reaction William had anticipated from someone supposedly living on the streets. "Welcome to Bellissima, Mr. Lancaster," the salon director greeted them, barely concealing her surprise at Isabella's disheveled appearance. "We've cleared our schedule as requested." William nodded curtly. "I need a complete transformation. Hair, makeup, wardrobe, everything. The wedding is tomorrow evening." The director's professional smile never faltered as she guided Isabella through the salon's various stations. William settled into a plush waiting area with a glass of scotch, observing with growing curiosity. He expected Isabella to show some sign of being overwhelmed, a gasp at the prices listed on the service menu, or nervous fidgeting as stylists converged around her. Instead, she sat with remarkable composure as they discussed color palettes and styling options, occasionally offering her own preferences with quiet confidence. Hours ticked by as William alternated between checking emails and stealing glances at Isabella's progress. A team of 5 specialists worked methodically to erase every trace of her life on the streets. First came the hair. What emerged from beneath layers of grime was not the dull, damaged mane he expected, but rich brunette waves that the stylist worked into an elegant updo. Next, a skin specialist spent nearly an hour on treatments before the makeup artist even began her work. "Something's not right," William muttered to himself, watching Isabella's interaction with a wardrobe consultant. She wasn't reacting like someone experiencing luxury for the first time. When presented with designer options, she moved naturally among the racks, examining fabric quality with the discerning touch of someone well-versed in high fashion. "Is everything to your satisfaction, Mr. Lancaster?" the salon director inquired, returning with another scotch. "How is she doing?" he asked instead of answering. The director glanced toward the fitting rooms. "Remarkably well, actually. Most clients require significant guidance their first time here, but your guest?" She hesitated. "She seems quite familiar with our processes." That confirmation of his suspicions only deepened William's frustration. He'd expected gratitude, maybe even tears of joy at this Cinderella moment. Instead, Isabella was handling the transformation with the practiced ease of someone returning to a familiar environment, rather than entering a new one. A manicurist worked on Isabella's hands, and William noticed something peculiar. Despite her supposedly rough life on the streets, her hands required minimal repair. The cuticles weren't severely damaged, and her nail beds appeared healthier than expected. Small details, perhaps, but they continued to accumulate in William's mind like pieces of a puzzle that didn't match the picture on the box. When Isabella finally emerged from the fitting room, William actually stood up involuntarily. The transformation was stunning, but not in the way he had anticipated. Before him stood not just a cleaned-up version of the woman from the street, but an elegant, poised woman who could have graced the cover of any high-fashion magazine. Her champagne-colored gown accentuated a figure that had been hidden beneath layers of worn clothing. Her hair, now styled in loose waves that framed her face, highlighted cheekbones that could cut glass. The makeup artist had opted for a subtle approach that enhanced her natural features rather than masking them. What struck William most, however, wasn't her beauty. It was her complete lack of surprise at it. She examined her reflection with clinical detachment, nodding slightly as if confirming that the stylists had simply restored her to a state she considered normal. "Well?" William asked, approaching her. "What do you think?" Isabella turned to him, those same challenging eyes now framed by perfectly shaped brows. "It will serve the purpose," she replied simply. The salon director beamed with pride. "We've included everything in the package. The dress, accessories, shoes, the complete ensemble." William barely heard her, fixated instead on Isabella's composed demeanor. Where was the emotional reaction? The disbelief at her own transformation? The gratitude? "You don't seem surprised," he observed as they walked toward the exit, his tone laced with suspicion. Isabella allowed a hint of a smile. "Should I be? Most people would be amazed by such a dramatic change." "Perhaps I'm not most people." She met his gaze directly, without a trace of the deference he typically encountered. As the valet brought his car around, William couldn't contain his frustration any longer. "You know, for someone who supposedly lives on the streets, you handle yourself remarkably well in places like this. You didn't even blink at the 5-figure bill." Isabella slid into the passenger seat with practiced ease, arranging her gown as if she'd worn couture all her life. The movement was so natural it seemed ingrained rather than newly learned. "Why aren't you surprised by your transformation?" William pressed, as they pulled away from the salon. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Because I'm not," she replied cryptically. "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting for now." She turned her attention to the city passing outside the window, her posture relaxed but alert, her body language revealing nothing, while somehow suggesting everything. William's grip tightened on the steering wheel. This woman wasn't playing by his script. He'd expected to create a spectacle, to transform someone pathetic into something presentable. Instead, he found himself wondering if he'd been manipulated from the start. Isabella's body language didn't match her supposed background. No nervous fidgeting, no closed-off defensive postures that might indicate discomfort in unfamiliar surroundings. Instead, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly where she stood in any room. "I know how to recognize good opportunities when they appear," she finally offered, breaking the silence, "and how to make the most of them." There was something in her tone, not gratitude, not excitement, but calculation, that sent a chill down William's spine. The woman sitting beside him, radiating elegance and poise, seemed to be playing a game with rules he didn't understand. As they headed toward the wedding venue, one thing became increasingly clear. Isabella wasn't just a prop in his revenge scheme. She was executing a plan of her own, and William had the distinct feeling he was no longer the one in control. The gleaming Montrose estate materialized before them as William's Bentley joined the procession of luxury vehicles. Crystal lanterns lined the winding driveway, casting an ethereal glow across the manicured gardens where the city's elite had gathered in their finest attire. William glanced at Isabella, searching for even a flicker of intimidation. There was none. Instead, he found that same calculating look that had unsettled him earlier. A woman preparing for battle, not someone bracing for judgment. As the car eased to a stop at the entrance, Isabella turned to William with a subtle smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Shall we give them something to talk about?" she asked, her voice carrying an undertone of anticipation rather than nervousness. The moment the chauffeur opened Isabella's door, a curious phenomenon rippled through the gathering. Like dominoes falling in sequence, conversations halted mid-sentence as heads turned toward the newcomers. William had expected to make an entrance, but he hadn't anticipated this. Complete stillness, followed by a wave of hushed whispers that spread across the crowd with startling speed. "Who is she?" The question floated through the air, passed from guest to guest like a secret too enticing to keep. Isabella emerged from the car with effortless grace, stepping onto the red carpet as if she'd been doing it her entire life. She lifted her chin ever so slightly, shoulders back, with a discreet smile playing on her lips. There was not a trace of the woman William had found on the street. No hesitation, no wide-eyed wonder at the luxury surrounding her. Instead, her eyes swept across the gathering with calm assessment, acknowledging the attention without appearing to seek it. William offered his arm, which she accepted with practiced ease. As they began walking, he realized with growing bewilderment that he wasn't guiding her. They were moving in perfect synchronization, with Isabella matching his stride as if they'd attended countless events together. The whispers intensified, creating a backdrop of curiosity that followed them across the grounds. "That's William Lancaster with her," a woman in sapphire blue murmured to her companion, not bothering to lower her voice. "But who is she? I know everyone who matters in this city." Isabella's lips curved upward at the comment, a private amusement dancing in her eyes that only William caught. He'd expected to shepherd a grateful outsider through unfamiliar territory. Instead, He found himself wondering if he was the one being led. A group of men in bespoke suits tracked Isabella's movement with undisguised interest, their gazes lingering longer than propriety allowed. Yet, it wasn't merely her beauty that commanded their attention. It was the way she carried herself, with an air of someone who didn't need validation from anyone present. In a room where social approval was currency, Isabella's apparent indifference to it made her instantly fascinating. Did William finally settle down? A middle-aged woman in a designer gown speculated loudly enough for them to hear. Or is this another of his temporary distractions? Isabella's step didn't falter, but William felt her glance slide toward him, sharp with assessment. He suddenly realized how she must see him, a shallow man with predictable patterns, bringing women as accessories rather than companions. The thought made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't quite define. "They're trying to place you," William murmured as they navigated through the crowd. "Everyone here thinks they know everyone who matters. How disappointing for them to discover they don't," Isabella replied, her voice light but edged with something harder. A server approached with champagne, and Isabella accepted a glass with a poised "thank you" that carried the perfect blend of warmth and distance. Approachable but not inviting further conversation. It was the exact tone used by those who moved in these circles regularly, a social skill William had observed countless times, but never expected to see from someone he'd met on the street. As they moved deeper into the gathering, William became increasingly aware that he was no longer the puppeteer pulling strings in this scenario. The revenge he'd planned, showing up with someone unexpected to unsettle Olivia, was unfolding, but not on his terms. Isabella wasn't playing the role of grateful companion. She was commanding the space around her, transforming what should have been a simple statement of defiance into something far more complex. "Lancaster's date is causing quite the stir," an older gentleman commented to his circle as William and Isabella passed. "Haven't seen Harrington's crowd this unsettled since the merger announcement." Isabella tilted her head slightly at the mention of Harrington, a subtle movement that William might have missed if he hadn't been watching her so closely. It was the first reaction that seemed genuine rather than calculated, a momentary slip in her perfect composure that vanished as quickly as it had appeared. They paused at the edge of the garden terrace, where the wedding ceremony would soon begin. From this vantage point, William could see Olivia in the distance, surrounded by bridesmaids in pale gold dresses. She hadn't noticed them yet, but it was only a matter of time. "You're not what I expected," William admitted, studying Isabella's profile as she surveyed the crowd. "I thought you'd be nervous, overwhelmed. Instead, you look like you've been attending events like this your entire life." "Perhaps I have," Isabella replied cryptically, meeting his gaze with steady eyes. "Or perhaps when you've been invisible to society long enough, you learn to observe how it works from the outside. Either way, the result is the same, isn't it?" Before William could respond, he noticed a sudden shift in the energy around them. Olivia had emerged from her circle of attendants, her gaze now fixed directly on them, on Isabella specifically, with an expression that traveled from curiosity to confusion, to something approaching alarm. "It seems the bride has noticed your choice of companion," Isabella observed, her voice so calm it was almost unnerving. "Shall we go say hello? It would be rude not to congratulate her, wouldn't it?" William felt a chill at the deliberate innocence in her tone. Whatever game Isabella was playing, it was far more intricate than his simple plan for petty revenge. She wasn't just there to make Olivia jealous or uncomfortable. She was hunting for something specific, and William suddenly realized he had no idea what that might be. "After you," he said, gesturing toward Olivia with a feeling that he was unleashing something he couldn't control. Isabella smiled, a real smile this time, sharp and satisfied, and began moving purposefully toward the bride, parting the crowd effortlessly as guests stepped aside, still whispering about her identity. William followed, no longer the architect of this confrontation, but merely its witness, watching as Isabella prepared to face Olivia with the focused intent of someone who had been waiting for this moment far longer than the few hours since he'd proposed his scheme. The space between Isabella and Olivia shrank with each deliberate step, carrying with it the weight of a confrontation years in the making. Behind Olivia's perfect smile lurked a woman who had disrupted lives without consequence. But what she couldn't possibly know was that the elegant stranger approaching her wasn't simply William's random date. As Isabella moved closer, the bride's composure began to crack, barely perceptible to most guests, but unmistakable to those watching closely. William guided Isabella through the crowd with a subtle hand at the small of her back, his face betraying nothing of the satisfaction he felt as they approached Olivia and her fiancé Charles. Olivia stood resplendent in her wedding gown, champagne glass in hand, laughing at something Charles had whispered in her ear. The moment she spotted William, her laughter died mid-breath, her eyes flickering between him and the mysterious woman by his side. "William, how nice of you to come," Olivia managed, her perfectly crafted smile faltering at the edges. Her eyes, however, remained fixed on Isabella, narrowing slightly as if trying to place her in a mental catalogue of acquaintances. "I wouldn't have missed it," William replied smoothly. "Olivia, Charles, I'd like you to meet Isabella." Isabella extended her hand naturally, with the practiced ease of someone who had attended countless social functions. "Congratulations on your wedding day," she said, her voice firm and elegant, showing not the slightest hint of submission or discomfort. The contrast with Olivia's visible unease couldn't have been more striking. Olivia accepted the handshake, her grip a little too tight, her assessment of Isabella now unmistakably deliberate. Her eyes traveled from Isabella's perfectly styled hair to her champagne gown, searching for clues. "You look familiar," Olivia said finally, her head tilting slightly. "Have we met before?" The question hung in the air, weighted with unspoken tension. Charles shifted uncomfortably beside his new bride, sensing something beneath the surface of this seemingly innocuous exchange. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced," Isabella replied, maintaining unbroken eye contact, "though I've certainly heard a great deal about you." William watched the exchange with growing fascination. This wasn't the confrontation he had imagined when crafting his revenge plan. Isabella wasn't playing the role of an uncomfortable outsider. She was orchestrating her own performance with precision. "You remind me of someone," Olivia persisted, unwilling to let go of the nagging familiarity. Her fingers tightened around her champagne flute, knuckles whitening against the crystal. "What did you say your surname was?" "I didn't," Isabella answered with a small, enigmatic smile. "But I understand the feeling of recognition. Sometimes people enter our lives in ways we don't expect." Charles attempted to ease the mounting tension. "So, how did you two meet?" William's been quite the mystery man these past few months. Before William could fabricate an answer, Isabella spoke. "Sometimes the most meaningful connections happen when you least expect them." Her gaze shifted momentarily to William, then back to Olivia. "I was actually once engaged myself." The unexpected revelation caught Olivia off guard. "Oh? What happened?" "It didn't work out," Isabella said, her voice dropping just enough to create intimacy in their circle. "My fiancé decided I wasn't the right choice for his family." The parallel to Olivia's own actions with William was unmistakable. Olivia's face drained of color, her micro-expressions betraying a flicker of recognition, not of Isabella's identity, but of the deliberate nature of her words. William fought to maintain his composure, realizing Isabella had just delivered a masterful blow without revealing her hand. An uncomfortable silence descended upon the group. Olivia's eyes narrowed further, the forced smile now completely gone from her face. She examined Isabella more carefully, her gaze lingering on features that might provide clues to this woman's identity. "How interesting," Olivia finally managed, her voice tight. "And what is it that you do, Isabella?" "I'm between ventures at the moment," Isabella replied, the vague answer offering no real information. "Life has a way of redirecting our paths when necessary. Wouldn't you agree?" Charles, clearly sensing his new wife's discomfort, attempted to salvage the conversation. "Well, we're just glad you could both join us today. The ceremony was beautiful, wasn't it?" "Absolutely stunning," Isabella agreed, turning her attention to Charles with practiced grace. "The attention to detail is remarkable." She gestured toward the elaborate floral arrangements. "Though I've always believed the most impressive aspects of gatherings like this are the connections formed and rekindled." The emphasis on the last word sent another wave of visible discomfort through Olivia. She took a quick sip of champagne, her eyes darting around the room as if seeking escape. "If you'll excuse us," Isabella said smoothly, turning to William with a small nod. "I believe they're playing our song, William. Shall we?" Without waiting for Olivia's response, Isabella placed her hand in William's and guided him toward the dance floor, leaving the bride visibly unsettled. William followed her lead, noting how she'd completely reversed their dynamic. She was now leading their performance, not him. As they moved away, William glanced back to see Olivia still watching them, distress evident in her posture and expression. She leaned toward Charles, whispering something urgent while her eyes remained fixed on Isabella's retreating figure. "That was unexpected," William murmured as they reached the dance floor. "You clearly have your own agenda here." Isabella's lips curved into a subtle smile as she positioned herself for their dance. "Everyone has an agenda, William. Some are just better at disguising it than others." As William placed his hand on her waist, he realized that Isabella had transformed his simple revenge plan into something far more complex. The woman in his arms was no passive participant. She was executing a strategy of her own, one that seemed to target Olivia with precision that suggested personal motivation. "You know her, don't you?" he asked quietly as they began to move with the music. "That wasn't just about helping me make a point." Isabella's eyes met his, revealing nothing and everything at once. "Let's just say Olivia and I have unfinished business. Business that began long before you offered me $20,000 to accompany you tonight." The admission sent a chill down William's spine. As they glided across the dance floor, the weight of unspoken truths hung between them. Whatever game Isabella was playing, it was clear that Olivia was right to be disturbed by her presence. This mysterious woman hadn't appeared in William's life by chance, and he was beginning to suspect he wasn't the orchestrator of tonight's events, but merely a convenient accessory. The truth always reveals itself in the smallest details. Isabella's hand rested perfectly in William's as they danced, but her eyes told a different story, one written in the language of old money and power plays. Behind her borrowed dress and fresh makeup lay someone who knew exactly how to navigate the room full of elites, leaving William to wonder who exactly had he brought to this wedding. "You did that on purpose," William murmured as they moved away from Olivia, their bodies finding an immediate rhythm on the dance floor. The string quartet played softly in the background, their melancholy notes providing the perfect soundtrack to this unfolding drama. Isabella's lips curved into a subtle smile. "Did what exactly?" "That comment about your engagement. The way you looked at her. You knew exactly what you were doing." William's voice remained low, controlled, but his eyes betrayed his frustration. The woman in his arms was not following his carefully orchestrated plan. She was writing her own. Isabella moved with a natural fluidity that spoke of years of practice, her footwork matching his perfectly, despite never having danced together before. The realization only deepened William's suspicion. No one who had been living on the streets would possess such refined coordination, such innate understanding of ballroom etiquette. "I've been in this world before," she admitted, her voice barely audible above the music. The confession wasn't apologetic. It was matter-of-fact, as if she were simply acknowledging something William should have figured out hours ago. William felt his jaw tighten as they executed a perfect turn. Every movement between them spoke of practiced coordination, a silent dialogue of lead and follow that typically took partners months to develop. Yet here they were, strangers until yesterday, moving as if they'd danced together for years. "Who are you really?" he asked, his voice hardening even as he maintained their graceful movement across the polished floor. Isabella's only response was a cryptic smile as she followed his lead through another turn. Her body responded to his slightest pressure, creating an illusion of perfect partnership that contradicted the growing tension between them. William found himself caught in a strange conflict of emotions. On one hand, Isabella had clearly manipulated him, using his revenge scheme for her own purposes. On the other, he couldn't help but admire her intelligence, her composure, and the strategic mind that had recognized an opportunity and seized it without hesitation. "Lancaster, good to see you out and about." The booming voice belonged to Harold Remington, CEO of one of the largest investment firms in the city. He approached with two other men in tow, all wearing identical expressions of curiosity as they eyed Isabella. William stiffened imperceptibly. These were exactly the type of business connections he preferred not to mix with his personal drama. Before he could steer Isabella away, she turned toward the approaching men with perfect poise. "Gentlemen," she acknowledged with a slight nod, her posture shifting subtly to create an inviting tableau without appearing eager. "Lancaster, you've been keeping secrets," Remington said with a knowing smile. "Won't you introduce us to your companion?" William cleared his throat, acutely aware that he knew almost nothing about the woman beside him. "Harold, this is Isabella. Isabella, Harold Remington of Remington Capital." "Mr. Remington," Isabella extended her hand with practiced elegance. "Your recent position on emerging tech markets was quite bold. I was particularly interested in your analysis of blockchain applications in traditional banking structures." Remington's eyebrows shot up in surprise and delight. "You follow the financial markets, Ms. "Just Isabella for tonight," she replied with a disarming smile. "And yes, I find the intersection of innovative technology and established financial frameworks fascinating. Your prediction about the regulatory challenges facing decentralized finance was particularly insightful." William watched in astonishment as Isabella effortlessly engaged all three businessmen in a detailed discussion of market trends. Her knowledge wasn't superficial. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had spent years in boardrooms and investment meetings. "The real opportunity lies in sustainability tech," she was saying, gesturing elegantly with one hand while maintaining perfect posture. "European markets are already shifting their portfolios to accommodate the coming regulatory changes. The American investment community would be wise to position themselves ahead of that curve." The men were captivated, nodding in agreement and leaning in to catch every word. William found himself relegated to the role of observer in a conversation that had nothing to do with his original plan. Isabella wasn't just fitting in. She was commanding the room, drawing the influential power players to her like moths to a flame. "What's your background in finance?" asked one of the men, clearly impressed. Isabella's response was smooth, revealing everything and nothing. "Let's just say I've had the opportunity to observe the market from multiple perspectives. The most valuable insights often come from unexpected places." William recognized the technique, a non-answer that left the listener feeling satisfied while disclosing absolutely nothing of substance. It was a skill cultivated in high-level business negotiations, not on city streets. As the conversation continued, William noticed how Isabella maintained control through subtle shifts in body language. When she wanted to emphasize a point, she would lean forward slightly, creating an air of intimacy that made the listener feel privileged. When redirecting the conversation, she would straighten her posture, signaling a shift in topic before she even spoke. These weren't the actions of someone playing a part or mimicking observed behavior. This was muscle memory, ingrained through years of practice in exactly these types of social settings. "We should continue this conversation," Remington said earnestly, pulling out a business card. "My office, perhaps next week?" Isabella accepted the card with a gracious nod. "I'd enjoy that, Mr. Remington." As the businessmen reluctantly moved away, William guided Isabella back to the dance floor, his movements more rigid than before. "Care to explain what just happened?" "I saw an opportunity and took it," she replied simply. "Isn't that what you're doing tonight as well?" "The difference is that I've been transparent about my intentions," William countered, though even as the words left his mouth, he recognized their hypocrisy. His plan had been anything but transparent. Isabella raised an eyebrow. "Have you? You wanted to use me to make a statement. I'm simply making my own statement alongside yours." The music shifted to a slower tempo, forcing them to adjust their steps, to draw closer together. William could detect the faint scent of the salon's expensive perfume, could feel the warmth of her hand against his. The physical proximity only heightened the psychological distance between them. "You're not who you presented yourself to be," he said finally. "Neither are you," she replied, without missing a beat. "You presented yourself as someone who wanted revenge, but what you really wanted was validation. You wanted to prove that Olivia made a mistake in choosing someone else, that she missed out on something valuable." William felt as if he'd been physically struck. Her assessment cut through his carefully constructed justifications, laying bare a truth he hadn't fully acknowledged even to himself. "Who gave you the right to psychoanalyze me?" he asked, his voice tight with defensive anger. Isabella's expression softened slightly. "The same person who gave you the right to pluck a stranger from the street and remake her in the image you needed for tonight. We're both using each other, William. Let's not pretend otherwise." Before William could respond, He noticed Olivia making her way determinedly across the room toward them, her expression a mixture of confusion and alarm. The bride had clearly been watching their interaction with Remington and the others, and whatever conclusion she'd reached had spurred her into action. "She's coming back," William murmured, suddenly aware that he was no longer the orchestrator of this evening's events, but merely a player in whatever game Isabella was conducting. Isabella's eyes flickered briefly toward Olivia before returning to William. "Then we'd better prepare for the next act," she said calmly, "because I think your ex-fiancé has finally realized that she's not the only one with secrets in this room." The private balcony offered a stunning view of the city skyline, but the beauty couldn't mask the venom in Olivia's voice. "That woman didn't show up in your life by chance," she hissed, arms crossed over her immaculate dress. William found himself cornered against the stone railing, feeling the cold night air against his skin. This wasn't part of his plan. Just minutes ago, he'd been watching Isabella charm the room, and now he was trapped in Olivia's web of suspicion. "I don't know what you're talking about," William replied, trying to maintain his composure. But Olivia's eyes had narrowed to slits, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the fabric of her wedding gown. "Don't play dumb with me, William. I've known you for years," Olivia said, stepping closer. The city lights behind her created an almost ethereal glow around her silhouette, contrasting sharply with the darkness in her expression. "Who is she really? Because she certainly isn't some random woman you've been dating." William shifted uncomfortably. The balcony door had closed behind them, cutting off the sounds of celebration inside. Out here it was just the two of them, and the truth hanging between them, like an invisible curtain. "Her name is Isabella. That's all you need to know," William responded, trying to regain control of the conversation. Olivia's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. "Isabella? And where exactly did you meet this Isabella? Because she certainly doesn't move like someone from your usual social circle." The tension between them thickened as William hesitated, weighing his options. Lying would only make Olivia more suspicious, but the truth would give her ammunition. "I found her on the street," he finally admitted, his voice low and defiant. Olivia's eyes widened before her face contorted into disbelieving laughter. "On the street? You brought a homeless woman to my wedding?" She shook her head, her diamond earrings catching the moonlight. "Oh, William, is that how desperate you are to make me jealous? To prove you've moved on?" William straightened his posture, refusing to be belittled. "She's a confident, intelligent woman who fits in perfectly with everyone here. Her background doesn't matter." "Doesn't matter?" Olivia stepped even closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. She correctly identified the CEO of Remington Investments and engaged him in a conversation about blockchain technology and European market shifts. She moves through this room like she's been attending galas her entire life. Her posture, her speech patterns, her knowledge. Olivia's eyes flickered with something that looked almost like fear. "No one living on the streets knows that much, William. She knows too much." William felt the first prickle of unease crawl up his spine. He'd noticed Isabella's refined mannerisms, but hearing Olivia lay it out so starkly made the inconsistencies impossible to ignore. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Olivia sensed his uncertainty and pressed her advantage. "When she approached me, she knew exactly who I was. Not just my name, William. She knew things about me. The way she mentioned her broken engagement. That wasn't coincidence. That was a message meant for me." The cold night air suddenly felt colder as William processed Olivia's words. Had Isabella targeted him specifically? Was their meeting on the street orchestrated rather than chance? "If I were you, William, I'd be careful," Olivia continued, her voice softening into something that almost resembled concern. "That woman didn't show up in your life by chance. She's playing a game, and you're just a pawn." William gripped the stone railing behind him, feeling the solid surface ground him as his thoughts raced. "Why do you even care, Olivia? Isn't this your wedding day? Shouldn't you be focused on Charles instead of who I brought as my date?" Olivia's expression changed, a flash of something unreadable crossing her features. "Because despite everything, I don't want to see you get hurt. And that woman," she glanced toward the ballroom where Isabella was still charming guests, "is dangerous." "You're the one who hurt me," William countered, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "You broke our engagement for someone with better connections. Don't pretend you care about my well-being now." "This isn't about us," Olivia insisted, planting seeds of doubt with every word. Did you even run a background check on her? Do you know anything about her past, her family, who she really is? William remained silent, unwilling to admit that he knew almost nothing about Isabella beyond their brief interactions. I thought not, Olivia said, reading his silence correctly. All I'm saying is that normal people don't go from living on the streets to discussing market trends with CEOs. There's something else going on here, William. Something you're not seeing. The worst part was that deep down, William knew Olivia might be right. Isabella's transformation had been too perfect, her knowledge too extensive. But admitting that meant acknowledging that he might not be the only one with an agenda tonight. I appreciate your concern, he said coldly, but my relationship with Isabella is none of your business. Olivia shook her head, disappointment evident in her expression. Fine, ignore my warning if you want, but ask yourself this: why would a woman like that, who clearly knows her way around our world, be living on the streets in the first place? And why would she choose to reveal herself now, at my wedding, with you? With those parting words, Olivia turned and walked back toward the ballroom door, the train of her wedding dress sweeping elegantly behind her. As she reached for the handle, she looked over her shoulder one last time. Just remember, William, people who have nothing to lose are the most dangerous of all. The door closed behind her, leaving William alone with his thoughts and the glittering cityscape. The confidence he'd felt earlier in the evening had evaporated, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. Who was Isabella, really? And what was her true purpose for being here? He pushed himself away from the railing, determined to find Isabella and observe her more carefully. As he reached for the door handle, he tried to convince himself that Olivia was simply jealous, trying to undermine his date because Isabella had stolen the spotlight at her wedding. But the nagging doubt remained. Isabella knew too much, moved too well, spoke too confidently. If she wasn't who she claimed to be, then who was she? And more importantly, what did she want? As William stepped back into the warmth of the ballroom, his eyes immediately searched for Isabella. He found her deep in conversation with Olivia, their heads bent close together like old friends sharing secrets. But the rigid set of their shoulders and the intensity in their eyes told a different story. This wasn't a friendly chat. It was a confrontation happening in plain sight, masked behind polite smiles and lowered voices. William couldn't shake the unsettling conversation with Olivia from his mind. Something about Isabella had always seemed slightly off. Her natural grace, her financial knowledge, her perfect composure among the elite. Olivia's warning echoed in his thoughts. That woman didn't show up in your life by chance. As dawn broke the morning after the wedding, William made a decisive call to Peterson and Associates, a discreet investigation firm he'd used for high-level corporate background checks. I need everything you can find on a woman named Isabella. First name only, no last name provided. William hesitated, then added, she was recently living on the streets, but shows signs of coming from wealth. I need this yesterday. The investigator promised results within 24 hours, but William's phone rang just 6 hours later. Mr. Lancaster, I think you'll want to see what we've found immediately. The file arrived by courier within the hour, slim, but devastating in its revelations. As William spread the contents across his desk, photographs, newspaper clippings, and corporate documents painted a picture that made his blood run cold. The woman he knew as simply Isabella was Isabella Deo, daughter of Richard Deo, once the owner of Deo Construction, a company that had dominated the skyline of 3 major cities before its spectacular collapse 5 years ago. William vaguely remembered the scandal, allegations of embezzlement and corruption that had brought down the powerful construction tycoon. But what he hadn't known was the name behind those allegations: Olivia Harrington. The investigators' notes were clinical but damning. Evidence suggests Olivia Harrington orchestrated the downfall of Deo Construction through a series of fraudulent deals that appeared legitimate until authorities investigated. Richard Deo maintained his innocence until his death by heart attack 18 months after the company's collapse. William stared at a photograph of Isabella from before, standing proudly beside her father at a charity gala, draped in jewels and designer clothes, her smile confident and carefree. The contrast with the woman he'd found on the street was staggering. This wasn't just someone who had fallen on hard times. This was someone who had been systematically destroyed. And suddenly William understood everything. Isabella hadn't been sitting on that street corner by accident. She hadn't accepted his offer because she needed the money. She had recognized his name, known his connection to Olivia, and seized the perfect opportunity to infiltrate her enemy's world. William had been nothing but a pawn in Isabella's elaborate revenge plan. Anger surged through him as he realized how thoroughly he'd been manipulated. But alongside the anger was something else, a grudging admiration for her determination and resourcefulness, and deeper still, a strange sense of connection. They had both been used by Olivia, albeit in very different ways. Night had fallen by the time William pulled up to the modest hotel where Isabella was staying, the temporary accommodation he'd arranged after the wedding. His knuckles rapped sharply against her door, the manila folder clutched tightly in his other hand. When Isabella opened the door, her expression shifted instantly from surprise to resignation as she spotted the folder. Without a word, she stepped back, allowing him to enter. "Isabella Deo," William said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Daughter of Richard Deo, construction tycoon. Not exactly the homeless woman I thought I picked up off the street." Isabella remained perfectly still, her face a careful mask. "I never claimed to be homeless. You assumed. You let me believe it." William's voice rose. "You used me to get to Olivia. This whole thing was calculated from the beginning, wasn't it?" Isabella's calm finally fractured. Yes, it was calculated. Just like everything Olivia does. Just like her calculated destruction of my father's life. Her voice trembled with 5 years of pent-up rage. "Do you have any idea what it's like to watch everything you love systematically destroyed by someone who faces absolutely no consequences?" The raw pain in her voice stopped William's anger cold. "My father built his company from nothing," Isabella continued, pacing the small room. 30 years of his life, his passion, his integrity, gone in 6 months because Olivia Harrington decided he was in her way. William sank into a chair, the folder sliding from his fingers. "Tell me what happened." Isabella drew a shaky breath. "Olivia manipulated my father into signing documents for transactions he wasn't aware were illegal. She created a paper trail that made him look guilty of embezzling millions, but he was innocent. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. She'd planted enough evidence to convince the prosecutors." William watched as Isabella wrapped her arms around herself, as if physically holding herself together. "My father lost everything. His company, his reputation, his will to live. He died of a heart attack. But really, he died of a broken heart." Isabella's voice cracked. "My mother couldn't handle the stress and the shame. She got sick, cancer, and without our health insurance or money for proper treatment, she was gone within a year." William felt sick. This wasn't the Olivia he thought he knew, but deep down, he recognized the ruthlessness that had always lived beneath her polished exterior. "I went from living in a penthouse to sleeping in shelters," Isabella continued, "from attending galas to standing in food lines. But the worst part wasn't losing our wealth. It was watching my parents lose their dignity, their purpose." William closed his eyes, imagining how he would feel if everything he'd built was ripped away through deception. "And that's why you positioned yourself on that street corner? You knew who I was?" Isabella nodded slowly. "I'd been tracking Olivia for months looking for an opportunity. When I heard about her engagement and the upcoming wedding, I started researching everyone in her circle. You were her ex-fiancé, the perfect vehicle to get close to her. So when I approached you, it was like the universe handed me exactly what I needed." A ghost of a smile touched Isabella's lips. "Though I must admit, I never expected you to suggest bringing me to her wedding. That was fortunate." William should have felt used, manipulated. Instead, he found himself marveling at her resourcefulness, her patience, her commitment to justice. She had nothing left to lose, just as Olivia had warned. "What were you planning to do?" he asked quietly. "Once you got close to her?" Isabella's eyes met his directly. "I was going to expose her. I have evidence. Not enough for a criminal case after all this time, but enough to destroy her reputation in the business world. The same way she destroyed my father's." William leaned forward, studying her. "You didn't just happen to know about blockchain technology in European markets." Isabella laughed bitterly. "I have an MBA from Wharton. I was being groomed to take over my father's company one day." A strange feeling washed over William, a mixture of regret for his own shallow motives and newfound respect for the woman before him. She wasn't seeking petty revenge like he had been. She was seeking justice. "I should go. William said, standing abruptly. You used me. I understand why, but wait. Isabella moved toward him, hesitation in her steps. Yes, I used you at first, but something changed. At the wedding, watching you, I realized we're not so different. We've both been hurt by her, both seeking some kind of closure. Their eyes locked, and William saw something he hadn't noticed before. Vulnerability beneath her carefully constructed armor. For the first time, he was seeing the real Isabella Deo, not the role she had been playing. Let me help you, he said, surprising himself with the offer. Not as a pawn in your game, but as a partner. Isabella's expression shifted from surprise to cautious hope. Why would you want to help me? William thought about Olivia's cold manipulation, about Isabella's lost parents, about his own wounded pride that now seemed so trivial in comparison. Because what happened to your family was wrong, and because I think we both deserve better than letting Olivia Harrington define our stories. Those words changed everything. The moment Isabella and William decided to work together against Olivia, their individual quests for revenge transformed into something far more powerful, a partnership dedicated to justice. The days following their confrontation at the hotel unfolded with strategic precision. In William's downtown penthouse, they converted his home office into an investigation headquarters. Corkboards lined the walls, filled with financial documents, newspaper clippings, and photographs connecting the dots of Olivia's fraudulent empire. What started as William's impulsive revenge scheme had evolved into a methodical dismantling of Olivia Harrington's carefully constructed facade. These banking transfers match exactly what my father described in his journal, Isabella said one evening, spreading documents across William's desk. She created shell companies to funnel money through, making it appear as if my father was embezzling funds when she was the one stealing millions. William nodded, examining the papers. My connections at Meridian Bank confirmed the transactions. We now have proof that Olivia falsified documents and signatures to implicate your father. The partnership they formed was unlike anything either had experienced before. Isabella brought intimate knowledge of her father's business operations, remembering conversations at family dinners, board meetings she'd attended as his protégé, and the specific projects where funds had mysteriously disappeared. William contributed his extensive business network, reaching out to former colleagues, investors, and even competitors who had whispered suspicions about Olivia's methods for years, but never had enough evidence to come forward. For Isabella, the work awakened both painful memories and a renewed sense of purpose. Each document they uncovered transported her back to the devastating months of her family's downfall. Her father's bewilderment as accusations mounted, her mother's declining health accelerated by stress, and their family home emptied of possessions. Yet these same discoveries were slowly clearing her father's name, validating what he had maintained until his death. He was innocent. One night, after 12 hours of reviewing financial records, William found Isabella staring silently at an old photograph of her parents. I used to think revenge would be enough once, she said, quietly, not looking up, that seeing her suffer would somehow balance the scales. But this is about more than that now. William sat beside her, careful to maintain the professional distance they'd established. What is it about now? Justice, vindication, making sure my father's story is finally told correctly. She finally met his eyes. Thank you for believing me, for helping me when you had every reason not to trust me. It was the first genuine moment of vulnerability she'd shown since they'd met. The wall she had built around herself, necessary for survival on the streets and essential for her revenge plan, had momentarily lowered. William recognized the significance of this gesture, understanding that Isabella's capacity to trust had been systematically destroyed by Olivia's actions. As for William, the man who had once sought petty revenge for a wounded ego, was disappearing. In his place stood someone fighting for principles larger than himself. His transformation was evident in small ways. The late nights spent poring over legal documents, the genuine outrage when they discovered Olivia had ruined 3 other families besides Isabella's, the way he spoke about their mission not as a scheme, but as a responsibility. When I invited you to that wedding, he admitted one evening, I was thinking only of myself, how I'd look, what Olivia would think. Now, I couldn't care less about any of that. Their investigation didn't go unnoticed. 3 weeks into their partnership, Isabella returned to her recently rented apartment to find her car vandalized, windows shattered, and a note on her windshield: "Stop digging, or you'll end up buried." The next day, William received an anonymous email containing only his home address and the words, "Accidents happen." Rather than deterring them, these threats only confirmed they were getting close to something significant. William insisted Isabella move into his guest suite for safety. Though she initially resisted, maintaining independence had become second nature after years of struggling alone. Pragmatism won out. They installed additional security systems and continued their work with renewed urgency. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former administrative assistant of Olivia's reached out after seeing Isabella and William together at a financial conference where they'd been gathering information. The assistant had kept copies of emails and recordings of meetings where Olivia had explicitly discussed manipulating contracts and framing Richard Deo. She kept trophies, the assistant explained, records of her conquests. She was proud of destroying your father, called it her greatest achievement in business strategy. This final piece of evidence completed their case. With irrefutable proof in hand, they prepared for a confrontation that Olivia herself inadvertently orchestrated. Hearing rumors of their investigation, she had invited Isabella to the annual Harrington Foundation Gala, a transparent attempt to intimidate her in front of the city's elite. "She thinks she's luring us into a trap," William said, as they prepared for the event. "She has no idea she's inviting her own downfall." The Harrington mansion glittered with crystal chandeliers and the jewelry of the city's wealthiest residents when William and Isabella arrived. Conversations quieted as they entered. Isabella's presence had become the subject of much speculation since the wedding. Olivia approached immediately, champagne flute in hand, and smile firmly in place. "Isabella, I'm so pleased you could join us," she said, voice dripping with false warmth. "Although I must admit, I'm curious about your sudden return to society after such a prolonged absence." Isabella smiled back with equal insincerity. "I'm simply reclaiming what's rightfully mine, Olivia, starting with the truth." The confrontation unfolded in the mansion's grand ballroom. As Olivia prepared to address her guests, William and Isabella took their position. When Olivia spoke of the Foundation's commitment to supporting those who have fallen on hard times, William nodded to Isabella. It was time. Isabella stepped forward, voice clear above the murmuring crowd. "Like the families you personally destroyed, through fraud and embezzlement, Olivia?" The room fell silent. What followed was a masterfully orchestrated presentation of evidence. Financial records projected onto screens, recorded confessions played through the sound system, and testimonies from former associates who had been waiting in the wings. As security personnel approached at Olivia's frantic gesturing, federal agents entered instead, presenting warrants for her arrest. "Olivia Harrington," the lead agent announced, "you're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." The society that had once celebrated Olivia watched in stunned silence as she was led away, her carefully constructed empire crumbling in real time. For Isabella, the moment brought not the satisfaction of revenge, but the quieter peace of justice. Her father's name would be cleared, the truth would be known. In the aftermath, as reporters clamored for statements and Olivia's business associates scrambled to distance themselves, William and Isabella slipped away to the mansion's private garden. Their mission accomplished, they now faced the question of what came next. "I never expected this when I saw you on that street corner," William said, his voice soft among the night-blooming jasmine. Isabella smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes for perhaps the first time since they'd met. "And I never expected to trust a man who thought he could buy me for an evening." Isabella's genuine smile lingered in the air between them, a vulnerable moment neither had expected when they first entered this arrangement. With Olivia behind bars and justice finally served, the driving force that had brought William and Isabella together suddenly vanished. Standing in the emptied investigation room of William's penthouse, surrounded by boxes of evidence and discarded coffee cups, they faced an unexpected question. What now? "So I guess this is it," Isabella said, gathering the last of her personal items. Mission accomplished. William watched her, realizing that somewhere along their journey of justice, his feelings had transformed into something far deeper than partnership. "It doesn't have to be," he replied, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "We could see where this goes." Isabella's expression closed off immediately. "William, I appreciate everything we've accomplished together, but I need to rebuild my life from scratch." Dating isn't exactly at the top of my priority list. I understand, he said, though disappointment shadowed his features. But I'd still like to help with your new consulting firm. Isabella studied him with those penetrating eyes that had first captured his attention that day on the street. Why? There's no more revenge plot, no more shared enemy. Because I believe in you, he answered simply. What followed was a delicate dance neither had prepared for. William respected Isabella's boundaries while finding subtle ways to remain present in her life. Each morning for weeks, she would arrive at her newly leased office space to find fresh coffee waiting on her desk. Premium Colombian blend, exactly how she preferred it. Never with a note, never with expectations. As Isabella's consulting business gained traction, William became her most dedicated supporter. He didn't push his connections on her or take credit when she landed her first major client. Instead, he listened intently during their occasional dinners as she discussed her challenges and breakthroughs. You know, most people would have leveraged what we did to Olivia for their own gain, Isabella observed one evening over pasta. You haven't mentioned it once to anyone. William shrugged. That wasn't why we did it. Then why did you help me? She asked. The question that had hung between them for months. At first, for the same reason you approached me at that wedding. Strategic alignment of interests, he admitted. But somewhere along the way, it became about you, about what was taken from you, about who you are. Isabella looked away, uncomfortable with his sincerity. This wasn't the arrogant millionaire who had offered her money for a bizarre revenge date. This was something far more dangerous. A man who saw beyond her carefully constructed walls. 3 months after Olivia's arrest, Isabella called William's office to cancel their weekly strategy lunch. His assistant mentioned he hadn't come in that day, unusual for a man who prided himself on punctuality and commitment. Concern gnawed at Isabella, until she found herself outside his penthouse that evening, using the access code he'd given her during their investigation. She found William collapsed on his bathroom floor, burning with fever, too weak to reach his phone. The man who commanded boardrooms and orchestrated business empires was reduced to vulnerability in a way that pierced Isabella's carefully maintained emotional distance. Through the night, she stayed, placing cool compresses on his forehead and monitoring his temperature as it gradually subsided. When dawn broke, William opened his eyes to find Isabella asleep in a chair pulled close to his bed, her hand still resting protectively near his. "You stayed," he whispered, his voice rough from the fever. Isabella's eyes fluttered open. "Of course I stayed." In that simple exchange, something fundamental shifted between them. The barriers Isabella had maintained since her family's destruction began to crumble. For years, she'd believed that trusting anyone would only lead to more pain. Yet here she was, confronted with undeniable evidence that not all connections were dangerous. As William recovered, their relationship evolved into something neither had expected. One evening, as they walked along the harbor promenade where they'd once plotted Olivia's downfall, William stopped suddenly. "I'm in love with you, Isabella," he said without preamble. "I've been falling in love with you since you told me off on that sidewalk. I've never met anyone who sees through pretense like you do, who fights for what's right with such fierce determination. I'm not asking for anything in return. I just couldn't keep pretending that what I feel for you is anything less than what it is." Isabella stood frozen, the city lights reflecting in the harbor waters behind her. "I don't know if I can do this, William. The last time I trusted someone completely." "I know," he said gently, "and I'll wait for as long as it takes, even if that's forever." What Isabella couldn't articulate was the war happening inside her. The walls she'd built after losing everything had protected her, but they'd also isolated her. Research has shown that healing from trauma often involves forming healthy relationships that provide emotional support and understanding. For Isabella, William had become more than a partner in revenge. He had become a testament to the possibility that genuine connections could exist. 2 weeks later, during a late-night strategy session for her expanding business, Isabella looked up from her spreadsheets to find William asleep on her office couch, a half-finished proposal for her newest client still in his hands. Something about his unguarded expression, the vulnerability of sleep, broke the last of her resistance. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered to his sleeping form, testing the words she'd been afraid to speak aloud. William's eyes opened slowly, revealing he wasn't as deeply asleep as she'd thought. "Say that again," he requested softly. And she did, this time with certainty in her voice. Their courtship unfolded as uniquely as their first meeting had been. They built something authentic from the ashes of their shared pain. Isabella found herself opening up about memories of her father that she'd locked away, while William revealed insecurities beneath his confident exterior that even Olivia had never been allowed to see. 6 months later, William suggested a weekend at a secluded beach cabin, a place where the constant noise of the city faded into the rhythmic sound of waves. As the sun set on their first evening there, he led her to a quiet spot where Jasmine climbed along a wooden pergola. When we met, we were both seeking revenge, William said, taking her hands in his. You taught me there's something more powerful than vengeance. Justice, yes, but also healing. Connection, love. He knelt on one knee, producing a simple but elegant ring. Isabella Deo, would you build a new future with me? Isabella's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of recognition. This journey from revenge to love illustrated the transformative power of relationships. As characters like William and Isabella navigate their feelings, they often discover that their shared experiences and challenges can lead to deeper emotional connections, ultimately fostering a sense of belonging and partnership. Yes, she whispered, her voice growing stronger with each word. Yes, I will. 3 months later, they exchanged vows in an intimate ceremony by the sea, far from the opulent wedding that had first brought them together. Isabella wore not white, but a gown, the color of sunrise, symbolizing new beginnings rather than tradition. William's vows spoke of finding strength in vulnerability, while Isabella's promised trust, where once there had been only suspicion. The wedding wasn't just a celebration of their love, but a testament to their transformation. From broken people seeking revenge to partners building a shared future, their journey reflected research indicating that individuals who have experienced trauma can benefit significantly from connections that foster trust and intimacy, allowing them to rebuild their sense of self-worth and security. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. These words from Nelson Mandela perfectly capture William and Isabella's remarkable journey. What began as two broken individuals seeking vengeance transformed into something neither expected, a profound healing that would forever change them both. Their path wasn't smooth. From William's initial shallow plan to Isabella's calculated revenge, they navigated treacherous emotional terrain. Yet in fighting for justice, rather than mere retribution, they discovered something extraordinary in each other: understanding, acceptance, and eventually, love. Real-life redemption stories often follow this pattern. People facing devastating setbacks who find within themselves the strength to rebuild. William and Isabella's tale reminds us that even our darkest motivations can lead to unexpected light. By channeling their pain toward exposing truth, rather than inflicting more wounds, they created space for their own transformation. In finding each other amid chaos, they proved that sometimes the people who enter our lives for entirely wrong reasons become the very ones who stay for all the right ones, offering not just companionship, but the chance to become whole again.